Okay, so wingspan stent is the next intracranial stent. It's also a self-expanding nitinol stent. The difference is wingspan is used to treat intracranial atherosclerotic disease, and it's a system. So you basically need to go up and pre-dilate with the gateway balloon, and then you post-stent with the wingspan self-expanding nitinol stent. Neuroform is only used as a scaffold for coils in an aneurysm. It does not have a lot of radial force. It does have radial force, but it's not meant to open up a vessel, where wingspan has 2 times more radial force than a neuroform. And this is actually meant to push that plaque open in the brain. So we do recommend in this case that you go up, you take the smallest of the parent artery vessel. So let's say it's a 2.5. You would want to take 80% of that and pick your balloon accordingly. And then when you would size for your stent, if it was a 2.5 distal, 3 proximal, you would want to take the 3 as your reference for the stent. So you always want to err on the larger side when you stent and smaller for the balloon. Yeah. Okay, so when you look at it coming out of the package is right here. It looks the same. It's basically pre-assembled in a nice housing unit already. It's a 3.5 French system. The other big difference with wingspan is you need a 6 French guide, where with Neuroform you can use a 5 French guide. So that is critical. The other thing with this, I think the more guide support you have, the better. So using the Neuron is very good, or even using a triaxial system with a shuttle, especially if you're stenting middle cerebral artery stenoses. It's more critical to have a good guide catheter support system. But as far as prepping, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to prep the outer hoop. And this is where you can use any size syringe. The key is just to flush it as quickly as possible. So that was nice. You only needed one syringe.
Okay.
Okay. And then you'll unclip here. And this one actually shows a 10 cc syringe, but we have a 3 cc syringe open, so I think that'll be just fine. You're going to want to open up your 2E and back flush the 2E first. Okay. And then go ahead and tighten that down. And now you'll forward flush. And at this point we can pull it out so we can actually see that. And the flush is going to come out right here, and you're going to get a lot of bubbles too. So go ahead and keep flushing. Okay, looks good.
Yeah.
Now you're going to do the guide wire lumen. Again with a 3 cc or 10 cc syringe. Okay, and you'll see a lot of air again. Okay, looks great. Okay, couple things to point out on the differences again between wingspan and Neuroform. The wingspan system is a unified system. The stabilizer you cannot remove. So when we pulled out the stabilizer to do the stent transfer technique with Neuroform, you cannot do that with this. In fact, if I were to unlock my 2E and pull back on the stabilizer catheter, that's as far as I can go.
Yeah.
So if you damage this hypotube, the whole system has to be thrown away. And this is very delicate, just like the one we damaged, to show you how gentle they are. You're gonna still see 4 radiopaque markers. You'll have the distal catheter marker, distal stent, proximal stent, and here's what we call the inner body, because again, it's a unified system. So when I advance that, now the unified body is touching the proximal end of the stent. If you can see that there. Another thing, because you're going through plaque, we put on the wingspan a dual taper tip. This tip is 9 millimeters long. I don't know if it's easy to see maybe against green.
The blue's better.
How's that? Is that? The key to point out is that that is not radiopaque. So that 9 millimeter tip is not going to show up when you're going through. Mm-hmm. And then the other key is that when you pull this out of the system, you want to have a 1 millimeter gap for your flush. So sometimes when you open it up, it'll be hubbed like that. When you're prepping it and flushing it, you want to advance so that you have about a 1 millimeter gap right there, and then lock down your 2E.
If you keep pushing, you'll just deploy the stent.
Exactly. But you do want a gap so that your continuous flush will go. And if it's hubbed, there will be no flush coming out.
Yeah.
Okay. So other than that, I mean, the deploying this stent is exactly like a Neuroform. It's a self-expanding nitinol stent. The only difference to keep in mind is you do have that 9 millimeter tip. So if you're ever going around a bend, sometimes when you're stenting into the PCA, this may be getting hung up.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind that tip is there because you're not going to see it. Okay, but if you want to go ahead
And this goes over the wire?
This goes over the wire. So in this, that's a great point. In this stent system, you will only use this with the 300 centimeter exchange length wire. So what we recommend is you would go up with your SL10 and your 300 transcend floppy wire, go up, exchange out your SL10 catheter, go up with your gateway balloon, do your pre-dilation, pre-angioplasty, remove the gateway balloon, and then you'll backload and go up with your wingspan stent system. We do not recommending post-dilating the wingspan stent. So if you feel like you did not get a good angioplasty on your first balloon, that would be the time, that if you wanted to go up and dilate again, we just recommend going to 80% of the vessel size. And that's that. So at this point, it's again just going to be an unsheathing. You're going to advance the inner body first so that it touches the end of the stent. So right now you pulled back, there's your inner body. Okay, and under fluoroscopy, you're going to see just a little bit of a gap.
You can see that bend in your body. So that's
Okay, right now it's touching.
Yeah.
Yep. And under fluoro, if we were doing this on a flow model, you would actually see just a little bit of a gap when it's touching.
And then just unsheath it.
It would just be an unsheathing, yep.
Push
So
it.
essentially, you know that you're going to have to, well, it depends how you do it. If you line this up in the middle, then you're just going to pull back the outer catheter. Otherwise, you can always do a push-pull technique. But the bottom line is once those two radiopaque markers, the distal tines and the distal catheter meet up, you're ready to deploy. So if you feel like you're not into position, that's a time where you can still reposition. And you just want you want 6 millimeters of purchase when you're putting a wingspan in. So 3 millimeters distal, 3 millimeters proximal to the stenosis. And with a Neuroform, because it's a scaffold for coiling, you want 8 millimeters. You want 4 millimeters on each side of the aneurysm neck. Nice. So keep that in play. Okay.
Okay, now we're deploying the stent.
Now we're deploying the stent. And again, it's going to do that segmental expansion. So one segment's going to come out at a time.
This is a closed cell design.
This is an open cell. They're both open cell.
They're both open cell.
Yep, and it's going to be just harder to see this without having a flow model. And right there would be your stent.
Okay.
And at this time, there's 2 frames of thought. You could actually pull back on your inner body so that you know that dual taper tip is not going to come into play or interface at all with the stent. So you would just pull that all the way back, and now you would remove that system all as one unit.
Nice.
But that way that you don't have that tip hanging out there.
Okay.
And you can actually feel the difference in strength. You'll feel a difference with the radial force, but it actually doubles when it's in vivo. So to get a true representation,
That's right.
you won't get that with just the stents outside.
And this is more flimsy than this one.
Yep.
And both are open cell.
Yes.
That is right. Nice.